Hello, whoever has joined us for this webinar. We are not starting yet. We're going to wait just a little bit just so that we can let people come into the fold. So we're going to start off though first with a poll we're launching that you should be able to see through your Zoom webinar. Is just to do a little check on who you are. Who are you? Who are you out there? Are you a student? Are you working in fashion? Are you working in sustainability? Or are you just generally interested in the topic? So yeah, it'd be interesting just to see exactly who you are. And if you can say in chat maybe like a little bit about where you're from, that would be interesting to see if we've got anyone in crazy time zones, like maybe in Asia somewhere. Maybe I should also introduce myself before like just belling in. I'm Susie Lau, and I'm a fashion writer based in London. I'm currently in London right now in a very strict third, second, fourth lockdown, whichever it is. And I'm here tonight to moderate and chat to wonderful creatives and individuals about a very big topic: how can we design fashion differently? Which is a lot to debunk in an hour. Probably not going to even scratch the surface remotely, but we have got a really wonderful panel with us today to talk a little bit about that. So I think we're going to start soon a little bit, but from the poll results, most of you, 45% of you, are working in fashion. So, wonder if I know any of you out there. Probably some familiar faces, names for sure. I think we are going to start soon. So just to give a bit of an introduction about Fashion for Good, who is hosting our panel tonight. It's an organization founded in 2017, and they are on a mission to make the fashion industry more sustainable. And they do this by connecting and working closely with brands, producers, and innovative companies to actually create change. It runs an innovation platform that helps fashion brands become more sustainable. And in addition, they also have a physical space in Amsterdam where you can actually learn all about sustainable fashion. So if any of you are in Amsterdam, hopefully I'll be able to get myself over there eventually once this is all over. You should drop by. But for tonight, we're actually going to be taking you guys through the exhibition that's on currently, showcasing the Redress Design Award finalists, which is the biggest design competition for sustainable fashion, which we'll be learning about more on tonight's panel. So let's get to the subject of the evening. So how can we design fashion differently? I had a few kind of just introductory thoughts because it is such a big question, but it is a question that I think has been maybe on most of fashion industry professionals' minds during this unprecedented year. It's a year where the pace of fashion has been brought to a standstill, and the physical consumption of fashion has also been halted, due to lockdowns, COVID restrictions, stores being shut. So it is a timely thing to ask, how can our approach to fashion design be different? I think we've spent the last decade maybe laying down the foundations, talking about the theory behind sustainability, and obviously companies dipping their toes into it. You can call it greenwashing, or you can call it just sort of almost like testing the waters with green collections and so on and so forth. But I'm, as a fashion journalist, obviously interested in the creative solutions and what creative solutions can actually take hold in the industry on a larger scale, so that we, see kind of wide scale practice of these creative solutions that are coming through, that are no longer theoretical, but actually working in practice. And where I'm also interested in the solutions that are actually showing newness and inject actual real innovation into, let's say, a fashion kind of trend cycle that has mostly been stagnant for like the last 60 years or so. It's kind of the same things over, repetitive, cyclical, etc. So how do we foster creative minds such as the ones that we have on the panel tonight, so that they can make a difference and be real change makers? And how can they infiltrate a system that is largely still operating as it did 20 years ago? Through judging the Redress competition, which I'm going to find out more about, I've always been super impressed by, the entrance ideas, but I'm also left wondering, how can they be implemented on a wider industry level? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the panel. Hopefully you can all see them. They're muted for the time being. I'm going to bring them in all together in a minute. So we've got the fashion designer Duran Lantink. We've got Christina Dean, founder of Redress, and we've got Yigit, one of the finalists of Redress's 2020 competition. So let's go to Christina. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with Redress. It is probably the most well-known sustainable fashion competition. Christina, who founded Redress, once upon a time was a dentist. And she was a journalist as well, living in Hong Kong. And she started Redress as an NGO committed to reducing waste in the fashion industry at a time when sustainability was barely in the mainstream fashion conversation. Redress has now established itself, as I said, as like the most well-known sustainable fashion design competition at grassroots level, and it's now in its 10th cycle. Correct me. 10th?
Yeah, 11th. I think we're going into our 11th.
You're going into your 11th.
I think so, yeah.
You hit that landmark, and with over 140 universities worldwide participating. And Christina, you've also gone on to start the R Collective, which is kind of putting all of that theory and techniques that you've seen through entrance into a reality of a brand. So what I really wanted to know was, because I've judged a Redress 5, maybe 6 years ago, and then obviously also just judged it for 2020. How have you seen like the competition entrance change over the years? If
Absolutely.
you compare like the first cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just pretend it's a decade from the first cycle, 2020 to 2010, roughly speaking. I mean, I think when we started it, we would talk about sustainable design, and it was all very confusing to many of the applicants. And we've always really had a very strong focus on waste reduction, because Redress's mission is to reduce waste in the fashion industry. So if I look back to 2010, engaging with fashion designers, we were asking them to source waste. That was it. That was all they had to do, just source waste. And even that required quite a lot of thought, because I think the common practice would be to go out and source new textiles. So even that took a little while to think of waste as a resource, as a creative resource. But if we fast forward to the 2020 cycle, we're looking at full life cycle, we're looking at circularity. our educational materials. You know, we've got to be ahead of the educational need. So it's basic. I'm not going to say it's black and white, chalk and cheese, but I can say categorically that the level of understanding is wildly improved. And designers are now thinking above and beyond just their impact on sourcing, because it's across the whole supply chain. So that's really, really good news. I think the feeling has also changed amongst designers. And I think at the beginning, to grossly oversimplify, you know, the types of the feelings of the designers. But I think at the beginning it was a lot like, oh, I think designers were thinking, oh, I should do the sustainable thing because I think the market's going to go that way. Whereas today, there's a much more wholehearted feeling of being an activist, and this is the way we're going to do it, and it's the only way we're going to do it. So there's a much stronger sense of commitment to the cause of what their practice and to their careers and what the legacy of their careers is. And also the sort of another sort of major difference. I mean, in 2010, when we opened, it was just Hong Kong, then it was Hong Kong, China, and we then included Asia, and then we opened up rest of the world. So it's not a direct real comparison over 10 years, but what I can say is we're pretty much getting 50 plus countries apply every cycle. And to me, what that shows is this global groundswell of, I'm going to call them activist designers, who are committed to their belly to really find these creative and often really difficult solutions.
Would you say like the in that case, then the education like side of it has just really kind of bolstered, you know, the kind of applicants that you're getting through Redress? Like students are already coming to you with this knowledge, and you know, like
Yeah.
they're coming, like rather than you giving them a brief, which of course there's a design brief from Redress, like more of a technical one, that the ideas are coming from the students themselves.
I would love to say that all unis globally or tertiary educational institutions are on it when it comes to sustainable education, but that would be a complete lie. And it's just a reality that most of these curriculums have not yet been able to either catch up, decide, write the curriculums, create the space in the curriculums, and bring it into the kind of mainstream course. So the bad news is that many universities are still very slow to implement it. I have a lot of empathy and sympathy, though, for universities or, you know, educational institutions, because it is a difficult topic to bring in. So that said, what's been really interesting, and I think it's true of all education, and we could all look to a school teacher and say, you know, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, whatever, really inspired me at maths, whatever. But it's actually really true of fashion design, I think. And I perhaps, you know, you might even have an experience of this, but someone at these unis, or these, I'm going to call them universities for sake of a better word, they are the champions. And we've experienced that over the last 10 years, because now we have 140 university partners. And a lot of those partnerships have been developed because there are passionate individual lecturers who go above and beyond to take this into their classrooms. So basically what I'm saying is it's fantastic, we're seeing it, but the reality is too slow. And how Redress is tried to, you know, as an NGO, we look for the problem and we try to step into the problem. And the problem is that the universities are not teaching it fast enough, quick enough, and enough, which is why some universities are taking in our educational material and using our teacher training courses so that they don't have to develop the courses. We have educational materials in multiple languages to help particularly emerging markets to get the information. And some universities, places, they make it mandatory for their students to apply, and that is just giving people you know, access to that education.
But also it's so great that students are also just bringing in their own personal interests, and like you said, being activists on their own accord without being prompted by educational institutions.
Yeah.
I think we're going to pan out over to the exhibition over in Amsterdam that showcases basically Redresses 2020 cycles. So the kind of there's a look from each finalist that you can see on display. But you know, what I really wanted to ask, and what I said in the intro, was obviously Redress is about students exploring ideas on a graduate and micro level of their careers. But what are your hopes for, or like your ideas maybe for these for these ideas like
Mm.
in kind of fruition in the wider industry. And
Yeah.
maybe can you talk a bit about like how redress has made its impact in the wider uh, industry, I guess?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what you're seeing in front of you now are a selection of our Redress Design Award 2020 finalists and some previous cycles winners. And each garment is its own journey and story, a magnificent scale of sustainability and detailing. But essentially what you're looking there is, as you said, Susie, you can say students, fresh grads. For us in the competition, the designers have a maximum of 3 years industry experience. And what they're looking at is obviously sustainable design through zero waste, upcycling and reconstruction. They're using waste textiles, of which the list is as long as my arms and my legs combined, but it's phenomenal the amount of waste that is out there. They're also even creating textiles out of waste. Now, to answer your question, you may look at these pieces and say, well, it's very experimental, and is this replicable, is it scalable, is the big industry going to take lessons for this? And I would actually like to say yes, because I think if we look at the industry, the industry likes collaborating with next gen. I mean, even if you're looking at business, looking at startup tech solutions, for example, and what you're looking at here is really the next gen's ideas for waste reduction, which can be adopted, replicated, and for the mainstream fashion industry. And to give you to name drop a few of the businesses that are working with some of our winners and alumni, we've seen collaborations between various winners and the likes of Net-a-Porter, Lane Crawford, Gallery Lafayette, Joyce. And we've had prize and mentorships with the likes of VF's Timberland and the R Collector, which is something that I'm personally involved in. And, in years gone by, Esprit and Shanghai Tang. So why I name drop these bigger businesses, and by the way, we're littered with many more collaborations on newer platforms that perhaps don't have the big sort of brand name behind them. The reason I say this categorically is because whilst it is next gen stuff that we're looking at there, and it's beautiful, and the sustainability stories, honestly, they sometimes make me want to cry. That is genuine. It's so heartfelt, the passion and the commitment that's gone into that, and the ingenuity and how they source, and the ideas that they have for scaling these things up and for replicating it. And I think that the fact that we're able to partner up winners and competitors with the broader industry shows that there is interest. And you can go out and look around at what a big business is looking for at the moment. And you said it in your intro, Susie, about how we have a reset, and how are we going to come out of this reset, or this COVID caused pause. Now, as we come out of it, sustainability is going to be very important. So each of those ideas have a place in the market. Yes, they need to be adapted, but they are still fantastic ideas from, the next gen.
And it also takes the right people, I guess, to implement them, because I feel like all the knowledge and the techniques, the sort of fundamentals are there, and even the technology as well, in terms of the availability of upcycled fibers that are not virgin fibers, like upcycled fabrics. That it's all there. It's just like the take up isn't as wide as maybe some of us think it should be. But I remember you also said in a previous interview that these things also take time, and that maybe we're holding the industry to quite like rigorous standards.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if we were talking 10 years ago about circularity, number one, no one would know what on earth we were talking about. And no one also would believe that it was possible, because the idea of a circular fashion industry requires so many components to ignite at the same time in order for it to really lift off. And why I say that today, we're a long way off really pushing circularity in terms of actually making it truly, truly real. But we must fight for it, and we must work for it. And actually, if you look at emerging designers, education, if you look at brands, if you look at logistics, finance, policy, all of it is pointing towards pushing for a more circular fashion industry. So it is a good time to be doing this. And this leads me to something perhaps a little bit a curved ball to share with you, but I'm doing this January meditation thing, trying to get my life straight for the year. And there was a really interesting Oscar Wilde quote that came up, and I felt like it was really relevant to share with you. And I would have to try to read it. But essentially, Oscar Wilde wrote whenever he was around, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." And I really love that, because, you know, that can be on a personal level, but as it relates to the fashion industry, I've often thought that the fashion industry operates in the gutter. It's a word that I use for the fashion industry in my most kind of annoyed, you know, feelings about what it's done to the environment, for example. So if we're all in the gutter, some of us are looking for the stars, and it is difficult, but we all need to look for the stars wherever we are in that circular ecosystem. And so, yeah, I wanted to share that little quote with you. Yeah.
Let's hope there's going to be a lot more stargazing going forward. I've got 3 questions actually from an audience member, and I didn't say at the beginning, you can, guys, you can come into the chat and have questions. We'll try and answer them through the panel. How many applications do you receive for Redress Awards yearly?
Oh, I mean, it changes every year. I'd have to, I'm not actually sure that I'm going to tell you. Is that all right if I don't tell?
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'll have to text my colleague on. We often don't talk about the total numbers because I'm not sure if it's, yes, colleague, listen, yes, it's about 500.
Okay.
500 applications. Yeah.
What is the fate of presented items after the exhibition ends?
What is the
fate of presented items after the exhibition ends? I presume they go back to the designers, no?
Yeah, I think some go straight back to the designers, some stay with us, redress, and we put them in different exhibitions, and some I think we keep for a short period of time, and so that we can do the best of and bring them back. That's broadly what happens.
And a more interesting question is, are the examples of exhibited items to be worn casually by those who acquired it, if this happens at all? I guess, like, are they worn in a real life situation is what is asking.
Well, the creative brief is for marketable to a certain type of consumer. So obviously they need to match that type of creative brief. I think it depends on what your lifestyle is and what your, you know, what sort of clothes you wear. They definitely can be worn for sure, but that's not something that we don't send them down the high street, you know.
I had a few more questions, but I am very conscious of time. I feel like I want to maybe bring this question in with everyone at the end, and then just let's maybe speak to Gonal now, and then bring you back in for some bigger overarching questions. So I have Gonal Yigit with us. She we're going to pan back out to the exhibition so that you can see her work. She is a Redress Design Award finalist from the 2020 cycle, so the last year's cycle. She's just graduated from the Bachelor of Arts in Fashion Design at Artes in Arnhem in Netherlands. And her collection, which she entered the competition with, is called Suitable, and it's an kind of upcycle secondhand clothing, and it's inspired by your grandfather's kind of style of dressing. Is that correct, Gonal?
Yes, my grandfather's style, which is really recognizable Turkish grandpa style, I call it.
What would recognizable Turkish grandpas dress like?
Well, it's like grayish, like toned down in colors, and like the main element is the suit, like gray brownish, and then the second element is the checked blouse, and the third element, like a key piece, is the like argyle sweater with the argyle pattern in it. So these 3 elements are like the main elements of my collection as well. Also, what inspired me from my grandpa was like his approach to clothing, because he has only a few elements in his closet, like not too much clothes, and he can combine them all because it's all so toned down in color, which is.
And then it's basically about kind of just based on a few pieces, you can dress in a myriad of different ways. But tell me about your journey in designing sustainably, because as I understand it, it wasn't necessarily something that you were taught directly at university. Is that correct?
No, yeah. In school, it was never really like sustainability was never the main focus. Of course, you get the basic knowledge, and like when you want to go deeper in that, you have to research for yourself mostly. So that's what I did. For me, in my last year, I became more interested in sustainability because the
What was
previous
the thing? What was the thing that spurred you on, though? Like, what? Like, was there like a sort of lightning bolt moment, almost?
yeah, I think it was because before when I applied to the study, I didn't really know what the real industry was like. And on the journey, I got to know more like how the industry worked. And that was kind of disappointing. So I was like, yeah, we need to do this differently. And yeah, I figured out that we can do it differently. So I was like, yeah, take the challenge.
How do you think we can, if you just use your collection, I guess, for Redress and the concept behind it, but I mean, obviously the collection is really about the value of clothes and how our value or how we value our clothes has diminished over time. I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of how we can collectively change that value so that we, adopt this kind of more this less is more approach?
I think the designers have a lot of responsibility in this because we have the power to actually put meaning and purpose in these clothing that we design. And then with, for example, with the narrative or like the materials already, like where it came from. And then it's, I guess, up to customers to embrace that and like give their own meaning to the clothing. So it's more than just one product that they don't throw away easily. You just don't throw it away if you like give it more meaning to it. For example, if it's torn or something, you just repair it and wear it again.
What are your thoughts on, I guess, because as a young fashion designer, you've obviously just graduated, and I guess going into the industry, you're the industry is predicated on new cycles, collections, and this pervasive idea that there has to be more of everything. How do you, I guess, turn away from that idea? How do you yourself try and distance yourself from that?
I think that's has to do with like my previous answer a bit, like putting more meaning to it instead of fashion just being like fast fashion. I'm like, for me, I'm really trying to put more meaning in the pieces itself with like a lot of handwork, and the clothing itself like was from the previous there's history in the clothing because you can recognize the clothing that it was before but in a new way. So that makes it more meaningful and like there's some mystery in it.
Yeah, I think we've got a question that is asking you, how did you find your fabrics for your collection? So what's your favorite sustainable fabric? But as I understand, I think most of your collection was made out of upcycled pre-existing garments. Is that correct? Yeah.
Most of it was. And I worked together with a company here in Arnhem, a second-hand company that like they were also sorting out clothes for me that I could use. So I don't know if I can name them.
They're like a almost I think to be honest, I feel like every country has these kind of organizations where they are collecting secondhand garments, processing them, and either they go, maybe Christina, you can speak more about this, but like there are sources of these secondhand clothes in every country that you can plug into as a resource.
Yeah, I mean, with the competition itself requires that all textiles are either textile waste or waste formed from textile, or textiles formed from waste. But in arts, yes, I mean, you can, if you open your mind, you can almost find textile waste anywhere and everywhere. So to oversimplify it, I would be really shocked if people couldn't find textile waste. And sorry to make it so simple. And each country's got a different kind of story of waste and a different kind of statistic of waste, but
it is all easily accessible. I mean,
very,
yeah, like it's literally just sitting. I mean, yeah, I've seen it just in my local area. It's literally just sitting there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, designers are using textile swatches, cut and sew, damaged textiles, clothing waste, pre-formed, part-formed, post-consumer, secondhand textiles that could be sofas, broken umbrellas. They could be even car airbags. You know, it could be your grandpa's clothes. This is my granny's jumper. Someone asked me, by the way. It could be, you know, your boyfriend's t-shirt. I mean, literally. It is so many things. I mean, waste, by the way, we could argue all and discuss what is waste, because I mean, I don't know that waste actually, it should not exist, but obviously it does. And a definition of waste that I find very useful is that it's a material that it's lost its commercial value or use form by its current owner. So basically it has no value to whoever currently owns it, and that they don't want it, they can't use it, and that therefore it becomes waste.
One last question for Gonal before we should move on to Duran, so that I can bring everyone back at the end. Did you have to make patterns for the collection, or did you not have to make any patterns at all since the clothes had already been made, or were you just changing them? I want to say it's not like just, it does look like a lot more complicated than just simply tweaking them. That's my thing.
No, I did actually make patterns and toiles as well, because I wanted shapes, like my shapes were like different than the things that I could find, the clothing. And I deconstructed everything that I found and then put it together in my pattern pieces. So it would be even harder to find materials that would actually fit what you are making in the size. So I think it was really needed to make your own patterns for that to fit.
I had one last question before, which it sort of segues nicely to Duran. What would be your dream position now that you've graduated, of, you know, like a change-making position in fashion where you feel you could maybe like have the most impact?
Well, I want to start my own brand, a slow fashion brand. And I am actually currently working on the preparations for that. So that's in progress and exciting.
That is exciting. Which brings us to, I guess, someone who is at a later stage of this change-making process. So I'm really happy because I get to reconnect with Duran Lantink, who I met weirdly, not weirdly, you were part of the International Fashion Showcase organized by the British Council. And you did a brilliant installation at Somerset House, which I just thought was just such a, yeah, it kind of hit me in the face, really. It was kind of like this, like, you know, like this broken in store car crash scenario where you took sales pieces that were from discounted or past season designer pieces and hybridized them, made them new put new leases of life into them. And it was basically a commentary on, I think fast fashion are obviously the most obvious culprits, but within luxury fashion, there is also a lot of waste that goes on. And particularly in recent years, number of collections have ramped up. Discounting comes earlier and earlier. And so your starting project and thesis was really a commentary on that, and you've gone on to develop this into a fully fledged label, and almost business model even.
I think so, yeah, probably.
Yeah. Would that be a good summation? And you've gone on to like compete in the LVMH prize, which is obviously a very esteemed fashion prize. So I mean, I guess for those of you out there that isn't familiar with Duran's work, I mean, how did you kind of even develop this idea? Like, what was your lightning bolt moment in, you know, looking at all of this unsold inventory and going, I can make something out of this?
Yeah, well, I think it was, I mean, I started doing it during the academy, and also when I was very young, but that was more on a naive base where, I'm sorry, my voice, on a naive base, and I was just trying to combine different labels, but I never really was thinking about what I was really doing. And then I did Sandberg Institute with fashion, sorry, Fashion Matters, which is with Christopher Coppens. And I got the time for 2 years to reflect on the work I've been doing before. And during that time, I think during my bachelor degree, I was already reusing, but everybody was always saying, don't really talk about it. Just show your work. Don't really say that you're reusing old pieces, because they might think you're a lazy designer, or, you know, it's not a really good way to enter a fashion world within saying that you are repurposing clothes, which is now now there are, how do you say that?
Well, it's like an established vernacular of upcycling, repurposing. These are things that we are all like more familiar with, and maybe when you started, it was more of a taboo thing.
Exactly, and I think during my master's, I don't know, I was planning to do a collection, and I was scrolling down Farfetch, I think, which is funny. I was scrolling down Farfetch, and there's always this instant red, this red sign which is called sale. And there's always sale, like every time there's sale. And I just was thinking, like, how could this be possible? You know, I always I'm obsessed with brands and I'm obsessed with fashion. It's just since a really young age. So I never hated fashion. I love fashion. So I was always like, how could it be possible that all those great designers and all these, you know, those great houses that I so much adore, have this thing which is called sale constantly, and where is it going and what are people doing with it? So that's my starting point of not really reusing old pieces from my mom or, you know, from my family, but really starting to have conversations with small businesses here in Amsterdam. So I started really slowly having conversations with Van Ravenstein, like established small stores here in Amsterdam, and asking them, what can I do? Can I help? And can I get your sale pieces or dead stock? I started saying dead stock, and that was also really funny, because the moment I said dead stock, they were like, it's not dead stock, it's
I mean, even the sort of preciousness around the language around unsold inventory in luxury fashion is very like peculiar. And, you know, we need to talk about obviously the kind of heinous practice of burning garments and products, like the certain brands. I mean, they have obviously committed and said that they don't do it, but, you know, we can't ever be sure who doesn't or don't still, you know,
it's still happening. Yeah, it's still happening, and for sure that it's still happening, because I've been now in conversation with multiple brands and multiple stores, and what happens is it's all a finance thing. I mean, sometimes I'm a bit scared to say it, because I don't know,
Who's watching? Who's listening?
Yeah. And that's the problem also with fashion a bit, right? You always have to be very careful. And you shouldn't talk too much. And it's always like there's this really thin red line, and if you cross it, you're done. And
Yeah,
I'm kind of,
it can be a bit smoke and mirrors, for sure.
exactly, yeah. And I think the most common problem I have now is that people are saying we have all this stock and it's laying here and we want to give it to you, but there's like you have the buyers and then you have the finance people, and there's a whole problem in that system where it's more easy to burn stuff, because if you write it off, it becomes complicated in the books, like in the how do you say that, in the finance book? I don't know how to.
Counting.
In the accounting. So it's an accounting problem, and somehow they don't seem to get this worked out. And I understand that's also a process, and I can't say, hey, just move your whole system around and just give me the pieces. But I think there's a really big problem with the lack of conversation between sales, accountants, designers. It should be, I think it would be better if that's so much more open, because now I think I just read that there's like 500 billion US dollars which is not being used, like literally 500 billion US dollars of close
unsold inventory,
just pieces that are, I don't know if it's literally true, because I'm always a bit scared saying
but it's also, definitely like affected by this pandemic that there's even more stock and unsold inventory just kind of sitting there. If all the physical stores are closed, you basically have to shift everything online, and that that poses like a big problem. And luxury for the most part is sold on that experience of like in person, like clients in a carpeted room, and yeah, so there must be like some kind of backlog from 2020 just waiting for you to like get your hands on it. And I mean, the thing I love about your work and what I think is super radical is that I do think it is an idea that can actually really take hold in the industry as a whole. Like every store or every brand could have their own system of dealing with unsold inventory and past seasons. I mean, but in your opinion, like as a fashion lover, and as I'm a fashion lover too, do you think that it just comes down to either the consumers not valuing these pieces in the first place, therefore they go unsold, or B, the pricing of them is an issue, and C, also that they're producing too much?
They're definitely producing too much, but I also think that's kind of the how do you say that, the results of the 80s and the 90s, where things, if you go to Gaultier or if you go to the beginning of Galliano, things were so people were so obsessed with this branding part, where the industry also thought like we can make this in a ginormic, how do you say that, a really big business model. But then in the end,
like licensing, like like I guess Halston, that kind of era.
Yeah, but and also mass producing and putting big logos on it, and it became, I think hopefully we're kind of in an end of an era where we see that the machine doesn't really work, and where, for instance, vintage Gaultier and vintage Dior are so much more, how do you say that, likable at this point. Like people want to have like the vintage Jean-Paul Gaultier or the vintage Dior rather than for where I am standing, though. I mean, I can't speak about the whole world, but where I think it's not only a problem from the consumer, but it's also a problem from the middleman. It's also problems that retailers are doing.
Their discounting strategies.
Exactly, the discounting strategies, but also the enormous how do you say that, buying that they do, for smaller businesses not able to survive because they are buying so many, and then they can't sell everything, so they put it earlier in the sale. It's just there's this whole thing is just kind of stuck.
Dysfunctional.
It's
It's a bit
dysfunctional.
dysfunctional.
Yeah, it is. No, it is dysfunctional, and yeah, enter me. No, joking. No, it's just, I think there are many great options to make it functional again, and to repurpose all those pieces. And there are so many options to, yeah, to make it work. And I think the problem is not only the consumer and the designer, it's also the retailer and the salespersons.
I've got a question from someone in the audience, which I also found quite interesting. Have you come up against any intellectual property issues when you're upcycling, repurposing branded products?
No, but we did quite some research about those things, and we managed to
Circumvent.
yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, just as an is like I think it's really hard for the audience to see, but I mean, when Duran is upcycling a piece, it's literally like splicing and almost collaging out of existing pieces. So the change is like quite dramatic. It's not like he's just taking things and then, you know, I think it's like some of its original form. It's like splicing in a very creative way.
Yeah, these are a little bit more how do you say that, simpler examples, but I think it's also, for me, was also interesting and very important to splicing different brand dominations, you know, because I've grew up with a magazine where you see on the first page you see a certain brand, and then it's not able to be on the next page. You can't do Prada or whatever. Or a stylist can only use one look, so you cannot, as a stylist, you cannot combine an LVMH look with a Kering look, because it's all so complicated. And for me, that was also very important in my work, that I splice those kind of logos and put them together in order to say, I don't know if I'm able to say fuck you, but kind of fuck you from, you know, if a stylist is not able to do it, we as designers will split you up and force it together in a way, you know.
Disruption, literally. I wanted to come back to some general questions for everyone that I think maybe ties up our conversation a little bit, because I wanted to bring everyone back into the fold. I mean, how do we all kind of get away, let's say, from this idea that in fashion everything has to be brand new, or there needs to be lots and lots of it piled up high? Because what you guys all do are things that are involved in garments that are very like one-off and you know, aren't necessarily mass producible. I think, you know, what the real issue is, how do we, let's say, shift this idea in fashion that things have to be just 100% new?
I think the whole problem is that 100% new is just not chic. I mean, I think like repurposing or reusing is the new chic, rather than having something new, because now with all the knowledge and information that people are getting, it becomes more and more dirty to use new stuff in a way. And for me also, I think I was doing an interview this morning, and somebody was asking like, how can you, like, how, if there's an opportunity, or if you want to use new stuff, how can we do that in a way, you know?
You mean like new fabrics?
Yeah, no, this was the question. They were like, do you ever want to work for a big house or whatever? And I was just thinking about that, and I was like, yeah, maybe, but then maybe just create just one collection in a way, and then you sell that one collection, but everybody who's buying it needs to kind of give it back. So you have just one collection, and then you just circle it around and repurpose kind of till the end, you know, till there's nothing left. And I think also that could be so interesting, because if you look at certain designers when they do ruin in reverse, meaning that they distress jeans or whatever, you know, and it's always so weird to me that like a jeans actually is really beautiful if you wear it for 10 years. And so how interesting would it be if you work for let's say Hermes or whatever, that you just could reuse your first collection constantly, and just, I don't know, that was kind of the idea of how could I work with new materials or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
I think I was going to share on the idea of newness. I mean, obviously coming from an NGO working to reduce waste in the fashion industry, you could say that new is the evil. But I think the reality that I have come to is that, you know, creatives want to create and consumers want to consume, to oversimplify. And therefore this concept of new, it is part of the fashion industry and it's nothing to be ashamed of or to be furious of. But what we need to make sure is that new does not equal virgin.
But we should be talking about new ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
the newness of
the material,
and also the quantity as well.
Yeah, but I mean, I think on the quantity, I mean, someone has said it a few chats back about technology, about, you know, improving technology on supply and demand and understanding what consumers want and having a faster, dare I say it, you know, you say a fast fashion industry and everyone wants, you know, gets frightened, but having a faster response so that you're actually producing less, meaning, you know, that there's a technology to be able to assess what customers and consumers are actually buying, and then get the supply chain closer to the point of retail so that you can quickly replenish without having to oversupply. And that requires new supply chains, it requires a hyperlocal model, and it requires technology so that we can give, you know, people new clothes. Because, you know, Duran,
without reproducing them, you mean?
Yeah, without overproducing, and you can even make it from recycled fibers. So in some ways, I'm not going to use the word that is sustainable fashion because I've no idea if that is true, but I just want to point out one thing that became abundantly clear to me and painfully clear to me throughout COVID, which is that humans rely on their livelihood for this fashion industry, including some of the most marginalized, disadvantaged people in the world. And so we can't poo-poo fashion just because it's environmentally really negative, because ultimately it's also providing people with a means to stay alive. So for that reason, what we absolutely have to do is find sustainable raw materials so that we can allow the economy of fashion to continue whilst clothing people.
But also, you know, the people that are decision making can implement processes to allow these people to carry on working, but just in a different way. That would,
yeah, I mean, it's fashion is part of our society. It's part of the fabric of our global economy. It's part of the fabric of our home. And I just think we need to honor the good that it does. And ultimately, as a fashion designer, I'm not a fashion designer, but I think if we could look to the future and redeem fashion by allowing it to be this beautiful creative force that's innovative, sustainable, meaning, it has heart and soul, and it can survive financially, wouldn't that be just amazing? Because, you know, many designers, honestly, you can't pay for your rent through your bread and butter, you know, particularly right now, people are really struggling. So it's very difficult to survive with, like, you know,
brings me to, I guess, the final sort of closing is, you know, I mean, I've had so many conversations and thoughts with different designers and people about this, you know, how does this ongoing situation change, you know, does it speed up what we're talking about, the need for what we're talking about? I mean, this is like for all of you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say one final thing on this. As we come out of this, we will obviously all come out of this and we will start putting our hands in our pockets and start shopping again. And we can do it with purpose, and we can do it with an element of pride and put the money back into the economy, into the places that we want to support. And I feel like we can do it because we've, you know, had this enormous pause, reshuffle, and particularly with designers, then I'm going to shut up because I feel like I've had way more than my fair share, but particularly with designers, as how exciting is it to come into an industry that's completely broken, that's screaming for ideas and solutions, and that's willing to take risks in how they design, source, communicate. It's a great time to be a sustainable designer.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, I also would just like to add that I feel like I've been in this sort of online vacuum where I haven't seen like this it feels like grassroots fashion is really coming into its own, and you're seeing like more kind of through Instagram, more designers operating on showing that small scale can be beautiful, going back to that sort of almost dressmaker relationship. You know, there are labels like that are just popping up all over the place that are like just taking orders through their DMs, and operating like a very different kind of business model and actually making a business out of it. So that has been my feeling from this like period, that I think it has allowed actually probably the bigger houses, the bigger you are, the more maybe more flummoxed you are a little bit, like as to how to get rid of all this inventory. And the smaller you are, it's given them people the opportunity to say to actually have their voice heard. I would say. Would you agree, Duran?
No, I agree. I think this is the perfect moment, to be honest. I mean, it's kind of weird to say during the pandemic that it's a perfect moment to strike in a way. But I do think it's the perfect moment to strike as a young designer, as a sustainable designer. Because people are also during, like, if you think about fashion weeks, you know, there's just a small group going to Paris, to London, to New York. And now it's such a great opportunity to kind of break into the system because everybody is sitting at home. So there's a great opportunity to just strike as a young designer, as a smaller brand, to get attention, because it's on the internet. So you have like all these great opportunities to to get noticed, or I don't know.
Well, I am well aware that we are like literally going past the hour. Please stay with us if you want to like hear all the questions. We've got so many good questions that are coming through on the chat, but I should do the ones that were submitted through registration earlier. We've got one that I think is maybe more for Christina or for everyone. How do you see the role, if any, for fashion designers in making sure that the commitments arising from initiatives such as the Fashion Pact on climate change or plastics are met? Is there a need to bring together creative community and the international development community, non-profits, multilateral organization?
I mean, wow. I think, you know, if I were a designer working in a big global multinational, I would probably find it individually quite difficult to make sure that that company met the targets that they had committed. But so just as a personal individual, and I suppose to answer the question, and I hate it. I find it very terribly cheesy when people say, oh, we need to have collaboration in order to get this done. But ultimately, it's actually really true. So if you were a designer working in a big company, it's about collaboration with your designers, with your marketing. It's across each of the departments of that business that can only through working a multifaceted can you actually achieve the end goal. So it's a very touchy-feely way of saying that we have to work together to achieve anything.
And also lobby for in our individual countries as well, for actually maybe like even stronger like legislation to hold companies to account.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I suppose as you started speaking there, I was thinking about accountability. I mean, we all need to be accountable to one another on many levels, and so too with targets, you could say, to be accountable for the top tier, top down signatories, let's just say, it starts at the bottom as well. So accountability, honesty and determination, and also, I would just say a long-term view on it, because, you know, you've got a lot of these companies saying that they are slowing down on reaching their targets. It's not as easy. These companies, you know, you can't just join a signatory, sign on the bottom line and hope that you're going to get there. It's actually very difficult what many of them have signed up for. So it's hard graft and time.
I want to start like combining questions because some of them are quite like similar in scope, and I feel like we can kill two birds with a stone. I mean, one is, what advice would you give students who are aspiring to study fashion design, have a career in fashion, about the future of fashion? So I guess entering into this sustainability field. But one more specific question, which I think is quite good for Gong and Duran to answer, is when I worked on upcycled collections before, I found that the production was quite challenging, as it was difficult to find enough supply to produce quantities, difficulties to convince the manufacturers to work with such materials, costing was more expensive too. I had to really explain to the buyers that each piece was unique within the limited edition, and then educate the consumers to accept the unusual and imperfections. So I think that's like a really good question for maybe Gonal first, and then maybe Duran can give his perspective.
Yeah, it is really challenging to use like old clothing, but I think you should have fun with it. Like it gives also surprises that you were not expecting. So if you have enough nice material that you sourced, it was fun for me. But I get that it is challenging. And for me, it was, of course, one collection. So I don't really know how it is on a bigger scale and for like actually when the aim is to sell it to people. So I'm afraid to say something about that. But maybe Duran knows more about the commercial side of it.
I'm not really, because I'm making unique pieces. So basically what I do is I make one-offs. And now we're doing I'm launching my new collection, which is my own collection. So it's the first time I'm not collaborating with the store. It's going to be shown in March, where I've now made, let's say 6 to 10 pieces, which will scale up to a 50. So that's really small. But for me, it's really important to stay small in those kind of things. And also for me, it took time to build a relationship with the manufacturer and with the people to make them understand my process of making. So it takes time, but I think in a way, it's really important to take the time also and to educate the people around you and in the manufacturers and in the ateliers to see your different perspective on the making process. And then once it's working, it's probably going to work very well, hopefully.
There's one question that I also find quite interesting. I know that stores and brands are still asking for capsule collections, and I often find with like ideas around sustainability, and maybe Christina, you'll have experience with this with our collective, is that retailers or department stores like to pigeon things, put things, sustainability or ideas around sustainability in a box so that they can package it up in a friendly way for consumers. Do you think we can focus instead on slow fashion and unique designs rather than capsule collections that are simple and fast to reproduce? So I think what the question is really about, like, maybe retailers or brands or department stores or whatever need to do more to allow unique ideas and creatives this space to present their ideas.
What do you think, Susie? Because I don't know the answer to that, because I'm not really sure. I mean, a capsule collection can be slow fashion, so I don't. Help me with the difference between slow fashion and the capsule collection.
No, I think what it is like it tends to be, and and maybe it kind of goes more towards like the high street whenever they do like green collections. It is something that's more simple and digestible for an audience, and like maybe there has been this feeling like over the years that sustainable fashion needs to be like packaged in a certain way to make it like palatable. So it's like it's
okay, I got you.
More of a just a general feeling how I think maybe we need to change that tact, and also maybe even the terminology around it needs to be like very different.
Okay, but there's one thing I would say. So if we're talking about a capsule collection, let's just say multinational fast fashion brand has a capsule collection made of recycled polyester. In that situation, a lot of people will say greenwashing, or they'll have some negative slant on it. But my view of it, my view is that these big players are still working very hard to bring in new supply chains, new materials, new suppliers, new costing, new marketing, new ideas. And it's understandable that they would do it as a capsule, to me, because it's they actually put a lot of R&D into the development of these capsules. So to me, as a sustainability advocate, and please no one shoot me, but I actually welcome them, because you will never get a massive business to radically overnight change its supply chain, because it takes such a long time. So for me, the piloting, the trialing, maybe the erroring, it's part and parcel of the improvement. So I'm actually relatively, well, I'm pro even capsule sustainable collections. And then an answer, I guess, to the how do we move them to the business to be a slow fashion model? Well, that's a business finance entire different conversation. If you were to move a fast fashion business to a slow fashion, I mean, I wouldn't know how to answer the question in just a couple of minutes, but suffice to say, I'll answer it like this. I imagine the fashion industry as a massive cake, and there's loads of different pieces in there, and each piece of the cake serves a different part of the consumer, and it serves a different part of the economy, and there is no solution for the whole cake. We've got to attack a piece of the cake that you're interested in, focus on that piece of cake, because it's not a solution for everybody. There's no one solution.
For Gonal, there's some specific questions. What did your grandfather think of your designs? Which is very sweet. And what are you doing next? Which I think you answered earlier. She is in the process of launching her own brand.
And yes, with my grandfather, like, we're talking about it like since the beginning of the process already, because like I asked him to analyze his closet, like his garderobe, his clothes. So yeah, he thinks it's really funny, and he saw the whole collection, and I don't think he understands it really that well, but he's like, okay, nice. Proud of me, he said.
That's
I
nice.
guess,
You are in the process of launching your own label based in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, or somewhere else?
Yeah, in Arnhem actually, but I'm not really sure. I might move to Amsterdam. But yeah, it's all in progress still.
It's all happening in Amsterdam. Very very sad that I haven't been in such a long time. Some questions for Duran, maybe more specific. I'd love to hear about the experience of working with Janelle Monáe and Billie Eilish. And what he thinks the future will be like. Wow, that's like a big question. And then there's another question about when can we see your new collection? Well, yeah, that's an interesting question, because we don't know what the hell's going to happen in a few months' time.
About the collection?
Yeah, how will you present it? And yeah, how was it collaborating with amazing? Well, that's also a really interesting question, you know, that it's so great to see like big celebrities also showcasing
yeah, no, I think with Billie Eilish
fashion as well.
No, with Billie Eilish it was really great, because they were sending over her old pieces, which was really fun. So I was able to kind of dig to her old pieces and then create new items out of it. And then we did a cover with Corinne Harmony Corinne. Shit, I'm always saying it wrong. For the Days cover, where I get to create like the wings, and I actually, to be honest, the wings of the Billie Eilish coat are the repurposed vagina pants of Janelle Monáe. So we made like a toile with the vagina.
Oh, that's amazing!
Her wings on the coat, there are actually the repurposed vagina pants part. But we never told Days as well. We're just like,
I know, I'm sure they would love that, actually.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
What does the future hold? What does the future hold for everyone? Hopeful.
Yeah.
Hopeful.
Let's stay
optimistic, everyone.
Hopeful, optimistic, that would be great. Yeah.
I feel like we're coming to the end of our wonderful panel. I want to thank Christina, Duran, and Gonal for joining me. It's a very big question to try and answer in 1 hour. How can we design fashion differently? But I think you all brought like amazing perspectives and a lot of food for thought. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone in the audience. I'm sorry if I didn't answer all of the questions. There was some like overlap in some of them, but hopefully you all got a little bit inspired. Keep an eye out on Fashion for Good's channels for upcoming events. Thank you everyone, wherever you are. Stay safe, and yeah, let's hope we come out at the other side intact.
Thank you, Susie.
Bye.